Meeting passcode?
Should be underneath the end there. 037591.
Hi, Donna, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
We can't figure out our volumes off. They're just say something, Donna.
Donna, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay.
Okay, people are being, you don't have to let Mark remove.
Wow. Denied. Recording.
Okay, I think we're looking at it.
Okay. Hi, Andre.
Hi, Mamily.
How are you? You're on mute, Andre.
Okay.
Yes, we're good. We're live streaming. Yes, we are. And you can see that. So, Donna, not sure if you're there, but all of the resolutions, etc., are in the agenda. So you can follow along with that. How about maybe the county also can show up because I did tell them.
You know whose is whose there?
I just copy these and read from our meetings folder. That's what I did too. So. Well, if Andre came in, Donna, should be good.
Yes.
Why? You, according to my notes, we have for him. I know that's for you. So, we got 2 minutes. Is rain went to his last one? Good call.
No high heels today.
Good call.
I chose not to.
It's a good day for casual footwear. Yeah, that would,
Is the post action?
yes.
Are you seeing a lot of hybrid attendance with your other meetings, Robin?
No. This one is hybrid.
Okay. Interesting.
I think some people. This one I'm gathering, but
It's good it's an option.
it's definitely the next option.
So Donna, I'm sure you can hear me. We're just waiting on a few others. We should have quorum based on my understanding. So we'll give it a couple of minutes before we dive in.
Thank you, Emily.
Hi, Brent.
Afternoon.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Good to see you again, Brent.
Long time no see, Robin.
Yeah. it's- that's what I want. Hi Eric, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thanks. We're just waiting on one more for quorum.
I should see the mouse. and just bring coffee.
I was at lunch. I was at lunch. I'll make a note.
There's Fred.
So we have quorum, right? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have quorum, Donna. If you want to go ahead and start, we'll see if anybody else trickles in.
Thanks, Sam. All right, it's 4:02, so we'll call the meeting to order. And I acknowledge with respect today that we are on Robinson Huron Treaty territory. The land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and known as Bawating. Bawating is the home of Garden River First Nation, Batchewana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. I'm looking to item 3 on our agenda, adoption of the minutes. Could I have someone to move and second approval of the minutes of our meeting of September 15th? Someone?
Got Mark, Donna?
Mark, thank you, Mark, and Eric. Thank you. Any additions, deletions, or other concerns about those minutes as they're noted? And seeing none, all in favor? They are carried. Thank you very much. Any pecuniary interest from anyone today? All right, no declarations of conflict. Very good. Moving along. I believe we are at, yes. So looking for adoption of our today's agenda. Could I have someone to move and second adoption of the motion to adopt today's agenda? Anyone? Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Fred. Fantastic. All right. Any additions, deletions, or changes to today's agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right. Moving on to our 6th Environmental Sustainability Committee Spotlight. Fred Post, who's a member of our committee and the manager of environmental control at Algoma Steel Inc., has today's spotlight. Fred.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to attempt to share my screen. Not sure if I see where I'm able to actually do that. Can somebody advise?
Middle of your screen, you're going to see a green button that says share screen. You should be able to.
Oh yeah, just there it was popped up. Sorry. I don't use Zoom that often. I use Teams. So.
Just wanted to mention.
Okay, I'm going to jump right in, as I do have a commitment to go and pick up my son from daycare. So thanks for reorganizing the agenda a little bit to allow me to do this first. I'm going to give a bit of a presentation about Algoma Steel and some of the environmental initiatives, environmental related initiatives that are currently underway. I'll start with our transition to electric arc steel making and kind of discuss some of our additional decarbonization strategies, as well as I'm going to go into some of the other initiatives that are associated with our legacy environmental action plan, which is a multi-year plan that we have in place to try to address some of our legacy environmental issues. There's some incredibly positive initiatives that are underway. I only have the opportunity to talk about a couple of them right now. There's many things that are underway, and I think that the group would be very happy to hear some of the work that we're embarking on. So to start off, as you're likely all aware, Algoma they made the decision in November of last year that we are commencing an investment of approximately $700 million to transition our operations from integrated steel making, where we make our product from raw materials, to electric arc furnace steel making, where we will be recycling predominantly scrap metal to produce our steel products. The project overall will involve the construction of 2 new state-of-the-art electric arc furnaces to replace all of the existing basic oxygen steel making operations, as well as our coke making and our blast furnace iron making operations. This will result obviously in a very significant reduction in our environmental footprint from all medium. The diagram that I have up on the screen right now shows the intended layout of the facility. The blue is the new facilities related to the expansion on the electric arc side of things. There's a power station, and there's 2 large state-of-the-art bag houses that are associated with the operation. So the basic oxygen steel making operation that we currently have, the structure itself will remain, and we'll actually feed our molten metal from the electric arc into the steel making aisle. There's an extension there, and through our ladle metallurgy furnaces and into our casting and direct strip mill operations. There will be a relatively small recirculating water treatment plant that's non-contact cooling water that's associated with the process as well. But that's kind of the general layout. We have a scrap yard that's going to receive scrap by rail, by truck, and that will feed directly into the electric arc furnaces. A new power substation to provide the power supply for these operations, and quite a significant amount of ancillary equipment. The process overall is hugely transformational in our overall site footprint and our technologies that we employ on site. We're partnering with a technology provider, Danieli. This is an electric arc furnace operation that they have similar to what we're looking at. There'll be 2 furnaces that we're planning to install, and at the end of the process, we'll actually have liquid steel production capability that matches our downstream operations in our finishing side, and our direct strip mill, our plate and strip mill, and our cold mill operation. Currently we're not, our production of hot metal doesn't meet the finishing capacity, so this actually aligns things and fills that gap. It's going to have a huge reduction in our environmental footprint overall. The most obvious and significant is the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, which is estimated to be approximately 70% of our current footprint, or about 3 million tons per year reduction. And that'll place us as one of the leading producers of green steel in North America. From a high level, some of the benefits of the process or the project from a competitiveness perspective, as I said, we'll align our finishing and rolling capacity, our hot metal capacity with our finishing rolling capacity, which is increasing from current situation with the blast furnace operation at 2.8 million tons upwards to 3.7 million tons of steel production capacity. So huge improvement increase on our capacity in that respect. By making this transformation, as we're transitioning away from the integrated operations, which have a higher sustaining capital requirement, we'll actually reduce that ongoing capital requirement and allow more opportunity for investment into the downstream operations, which we currently have constraints. This will offer us a pretty scalable operating model and cost structure as the market demands or allows. We can increase or decrease our production depending on market conditions. And obviously this transition is going to result in a very significant reduction in our exposure to carbon costs, as Algoma is currently one of the larger greenhouse gas emitters in Ontario and in Canada. We also have the opportunity with this project to increase our product quality and diversify our product mix. We'll have the ability to have new grades of steel products that we can produce and add new customers as a result. From a local perspective, the project will build on not only on our organization capacity, but also in the community. We'll have a new modernized workforce with new skill development opportunities and succession opportunities. There's going to be approximately 500 new construction jobs in the region during the construction of the facility. And there'll be a number of additional new apprenticeship, co-op placement opportunities and other high skill career opportunities in Sault Ste. Marie. I'll get a little bit more into detail on the environmental footprint in the next slides, but obviously the 3 million ton or 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is huge, a huge reduction in our footprint. But there's a lot more than just that. There's a significant reduction in our air quality emissions or air contaminant emissions from the process, particularly related to the coke making operations. But there are others as well that I'll talk about in the next slide. So this overall will really position us as a much more financially sustainable steel producer and employer in Sault Ste. Marie, and build the next era in steel making in our area. This will undoubtedly put us in the top echelon of green steel producers in North America. To get into more of the details on some of the environmental benefits, the greenhouse gas is huge. This is one of the single largest point source emission reduction projects in Canada that will be employed this decade. It's a complete game changer from an environmental perspective. But beyond just greenhouse gases, this transition will eliminate existing noise sources and bring the facility into compliance with nighttime noise standards. It's going to be a much quieter community. There won't be the background hum that you hear in this day and age. We'll have much cleaner water and less water consumption. We'll eliminate as many as 5 of our industrial wastewater discharges that we currently have. There will be less waste and less byproduct streams that are generated from the process in terms of different slags, in terms of different byproducts that we're currently producing and selling. And we'll have a very significant reduction in our air emissions, air contaminant emissions from the process. Sulfur dioxide emissions will decline by more than 80%. Our nitrogen oxide emissions by more than half. And we'll completely eliminate the more harmful air emissions that come from our coke making operations, fugitive emissions as well as stack emissions. The transition will take approximately 7 years. This slide outlines the current facilities that we have in operation and the intended transition timeline, where the new electric arc furnaces will start up in mid 2024, and they'll run in parallel with all of the existing facilities as we begin the ramp up and commissioning of those facilities. In 2025, we intend on shutting down one of our coke oven batteries as it approaches end of life, and the electric arc furnaces ramp up. And then by 2026, we expect that our basic oxygen steelmaking operation will shut down as we settle into the heart of our transition, where we have the electric arc furnaces running in alternating mode, with our number 7 blast furnace operating at a reduced output, and still providing hot metal feedstock to our electric arc furnaces. By 2029, the expectation is that we will have the full power upgrades available. Full grid power is available to run both of the furnaces simultaneously, and at that time we'll be able to entirely shut down our coke oven batteries and our number 7 blast furnace, and we'll be able to produce our steel with 100% cold charge scrap and an option for some alternate iron units. Across the transition, there will be reductions in air emissions as we reduce our as we shut down a coke oven battery, as we shut down our basic oxygen steelmaking, as we reduce our output from the blast furnace. We'll see a reduction in the order of 600,000 tons of greenhouse gases in the 2024-25 period, and another 600,000 tons on top of that in the 25-26 period as we transition away from the integrated operations. So these are huge reductions in our process emissions that we expect to achieve through this transition. And then by the 2029 period, we'll be able to realize the full benefit from an environmental perspective. There'll be almost another 2 million ton reduction, 1.7 million tons or so reduction in GHG emissions. We'll be able to shut down a number of our wastewater discharges, shut down a number of the pieces of equipment that we currently operate that are considered noise sources in our site. Just an overall, there'll be an overall net benefit by that period of time. But that's not all we're doing from a greenhouse gas perspective. Algoma is really focusing on the future and looking at the entire steel industry's aspirational goal to achieve net zero by 2050. And we're taking a very collaborative approach. We've got federal, provincial stakeholders, other industry peers, research associations, technology providers that we're working with on developing a longer-term decarbonization strategy. And these are looking at really anything that's potentially available to our sector. Electrification of some of our processes beyond just the electric arc furnace. We're looking at fuel substitution from sources such as biomass that may be available locally, potential hydrogen projects, and general carbon capture and storage and utilization projects, efficiency upgrades. There's many different opportunities that we're evaluating with all of the different stakeholders that we're working with that ultimate goal that our sector has aimed to achieve net zero by 2050. So the EAF is the electric arc furnace project is obviously the lion's share of that, but it is by no means the by no means does it represent the limitations on what we're looking at. That last 30% reduction is likely going to be more difficult to achieve, and we're keenly focused in on what opportunities we might have to get to that net zero point. So moving on, some of our legacy environmental action plan projects I have highlighted here. The first one is our site greening initiative. This was launched earlier this year with a number of stakeholders. The site greening initiative is really looking to manage our surface and stormwater from the site and create green buffer strips, revegetating areas around the facility that are along our perimeters, and they're intended to create like naturalized buffer strips around our site perimeter. We'll be introducing, and we have been introducing, clean soils that we're going to be using to cap areas around the perimeter. We're going to create some seasonal ponding areas, ditching and drainage to go to these seasonal ponding areas to eliminate surface water runoff from the site. And we're planting all kinds of native species, trees, shrubs, other vegetation on these green strips to try to change the aesthetic, to contribute our part on tree planting initiatives locally to manage our stormwater and surface water runoff from the site. We actually had yesterday morning, we had a class from Sioux College that came to our site and participated in something that's been under development for some time. We'd previously provided some pots and soil and soil additives to Sioux College, and they had this class plant in their greenhouses a number of seeds of a whole bunch of different species: white pines, jack pines, white spruce, red pine, white oak, willow. Numerous different species were planted in their greenhouses this past winter. And that same class in the next semester came yesterday, and they actually planted one area of our site with the estimated total is 1,885 trees were planted on our site yesterday morning on our wind berm, on the south facing slope of our wind berm by our coal fields. So it marks a turning point in my view of where Algoma Steel's going with their environmental initiatives. It's only the first stage of many that we have planned. Our site greening project is expected to take approximately 10 years to fully implement as we continue our transition to electric arc steel making and free up lands for some of these greening initiatives. To support that, as we know, we need to protect our shoreline in support of our greening initiative to protect the soils that we're bringing in and the trees that we're planting. We have a project that is now underway to stabilize over 4 kilometers of our shoreline with armor stone and riprap. This will help hold in all of the new soils and trees that we're planting. This is expected to be undertaken over the course of the next 4 years as we bring in nice new clean stone, riprap, and armor stone, and place it in a design fashion around the perimeter. The diagram here shows different colors. Not all of them are completely visible, but we aim to stabilize the entire shoreline of our property with this in this fashion. So that's not all that we're doing. There's many other initiatives that we have underway, but I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight some of the things that we're doing right now that are larger in size and things that I'm able to talk about today. There's many more, and I hope to share more of them with you and with the community as we move forward over the next few years. So I'll stop presenting there and provide some opportunity for some questions and some answer period, and let's see where the committee takes us.
Thanks, Fred. I'll just ask you to start sharing your screen so that we can see everybody. Go to the middle again and yes, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Fred. Questions for Fred about that very helpful, I would say, presentation, being able to understand where things are at and where Algoma intends to go from an environmental perspective. Questions, anyone? Andre.
Fred, does Algoma have money to pay for some of the toxic legacy, like our Gateway site and other projects that have historically been created by the steelmaking process?
I think when you start talking about pinpointing the contributors to things like that, it becomes quite difficult, as there are a number of industrial players that have existed along the St. Mary's River on both sides of the border. We are working closely with the federal and provincial governments and the St. Mary's River Remedial Action Plan to address legacy contamination that is associated with our operations directly. For example, our boat slip is something that we've been working on for many years, that is within our realm of accountability more clearly, but areas further downstream are less we're less able to pinpoint the actual contributors, and that is a broader rehabilitation project that's underway with multiple other stakeholders.
Thanks, Fred. Other questions for Fred from anyone? Eric, Pedro, Mark? No?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, Fred, thanks for your presentation. Yeah, I find it's really exciting to see the projects on greening, and at the university we certainly have a lot of capacity to work on site restoration, ecosystem restoration with plants and soil plant microbe interactions, and access a number of funds that require leveraging. How do you plan, or how can academic institutions, organizations interact or work alongside? Is there, like, it's a similar question to Andre, do you have specific pools of funding that could be utilized to train students, personnel, and at the same time continue to advance the goals of regreening that area? That's one of the questions. The other question I had was more about, you mentioned about net benefits tied to by 2029, but at some points you mentioned alternate running of the existing blast furnaces with the new capacity that is coming in 2024-25. Will you see, you talk about reductions of 70%, but with simultaneous the two technologies, do you envision, or will there be increments before there is reductions? So those are the two questions.
Yeah, so the first question, Algoma has funds that are available to deal with on-site legacy environmental related issues. We started in late 2018 on investing in our site and rehabilitating our site. Identifying areas of contamination, developing plans to rehabilitate them, and then implementing those plans. And that is ongoing, and that will likely remain ongoing for the next 15 years or so. Our commitment was the 21-year plan, and we're currently in year 4, so I guess that means 17 years left. That it's focused specifically on site at this point in time. But we will continue to work with other stakeholders on other offsite potential issues, as it's it's part of the community, and we're working within the boundaries that we have of our framework of our legacy environmental action plan. For the second question, just trying to remember what exactly it was. Oh yeah, incremental reductions. So yeah, we will see reductions in emissions, air emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, wastewater discharges throughout the transition period. As we see a reduction, or as we see our electric arc furnaces start up, we will see a reduction in the output from our blast furnace that will result in a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. When we shut down our number 7 coke oven battery, we will see an incremental reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And in suit with that, we'll also see a corresponding reduction in the air contaminant releases, sulfur dioxide, benzene, benzoate-pyrene, particulate matter. All of those things will also see step change reductions as we move forward with the transition. When our basic oxygen steelmaking operation shuts down, we'll see the elimination of 2 of our wastewater discharges immediately. When our blast furnace operation shuts down, we'll see the elimination of 2 to 3 more of our wastewater discharges. So it is progressive. There are step changes in all, let's say, environmental media as we move through the transition. Obviously, the biggest step change is the end, when we see the complete elimination of our coke making and iron making operations. But there are a number of different steps that we'll see along the way, starting as early as 2024. We're expecting that the electric arc furnaces will come online mid-year 2024, and as those things ramp up and our commissioning processes proceed, we'll see corresponding reduction in releases of other areas. Noise is the same thing. When the basic oxygen furnace shuts down, we immediately eliminate sources of noise that we've been working on controlling for the last number of years. So, just in the last few years, we spent a few $1 million on noise controls in our steelmaking operations. And as we move ahead, coke making, the 7 battery shuts down, that eliminates another noise source that we've been working on developing plans for controlling. So yeah, it's across all media. There's stepwise reductions in all media as we move through the transition.
Okay, thank you.
Justin, do you have a question? I see your hand is up. Do you have a question about what Fred's talking about?
I did have a question, just really quick. I was wondering if Fred would be the kind of best person to talk to if we wanted to connect about the active transportation plan with Algoma, or if there might be someone else.
I think it's a good place to start. If nothing else, I would definitely be able to put you in contact with folks that can be more engaged in that process. But I would be happy to be your point of contact.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks, Fred.
I mean, we have a lot of employees that transport themselves to work in some way or fashion every day or night, and you know, we have a part to play there too. So we'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Stuff. Thank you.
I just had a vision of re-greening Algoma, the map you showed, Fred, with some beautiful trails maybe through there for walking and cycling for your staff, you know, not for the general public or whatever, but you know, there's that whole component that you just talked about relevant to the changes in the manufacturing process and its effect on greenhouse gas emission reduction and decarbonization, et cetera. But then there's also, you know, like what's happening to the property itself. So kind of cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it has so many benefits. I'm sure I probably didn't talk about them all, but you know, you're right. Like we're trying to look at the way that land use is going to change over the next 10 years and find opportunities to change the way that we look from externally. You know, what do people see from the streets, the roads that they drive on? What do we see internally from, you know, visitors and employees that are traveling through the operation and working in the operation? You know, we just planted one area yesterday. It's only one of more than a dozen that we already have planned, and we put almost 2,000 trees down. There's a climate context in that. You know, we're trying to support the Sioux College and the you know, the federal and provincial government's goals for tree planting targets, trying to, you know, eliminate the potential for surface water runoff from the site and manage that in a much more environmentally friendly fashion. There's just so many positive aspects of it, and we're really, like I said, we're looking at trying to find space that's not planned to be used. You know, obviously we have dock space that is intended to be shipping and receiving feedstocks for our processes, no matter whether we're an integrated or electric arc steel making. Those not necessarily can change, but others can. And you know, there's just numerous benefits. You know, wildlife that you know, bird species. We have areas that have naturalized themselves on our site that are just loaded in the spring with different bird species. You know, we're on the St. Mary's River. We're not that far from Whitefish Island, which is obviously a very densely populated area for birds, migratory and residents. It's really an awesome opportunity, and I think it's Algoma's really behind the transition of our overall operation, not just to electric arc steel making, but there's an environmental lens that's being placed on so much that we do now that you know, we're really excited about transitioning the way we do things and the way we're perceived. It's a great opportunity.
Thanks, Fred. Anyone else with other questions for Fred? Okay. Seeing none.
I have one quick question, just as a curiosity that just came up. Fred, you mentioned that there will be a new facility for where non-contact water is going to be exchanged for cooling purposes. Is there any possibility that hot water can be used to help heating homes?
No, this is a recirculating, like almost entirely closed loop system that's just recirculating through the electric arc furnaces. There is a cooling tower associated with it, but it's not going to be generating large amounts of heat, you know, in the water stream.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Emily, I see a note here from Justin that he's got to go. Do we need to make another adjustment in the I shouldn't say make another. Should we be making an adjustment in the agenda right now to accommodate his timelines?
We can. Justin, do you need to leave right away? Because we do have another guest here with us that we could breeze through their project really quickly. Like, what's your timeline right now?
Well, I was hoping to. I've got to kind of get. I have children to deal with, so I was going to try and run pretty soon. if it's at all possible, I mean, I can just, I guess, provide like a bit of verbal information about where we're at. We haven't incorporated the feedback from the previous meeting yet, but we're just kind of meeting to do that. So if there's other feedback, then I can accept it in writing. Is Steve here today?
Yeah,
I can't see him.
So we can just go ahead and talk to this agenda item, Donna, which is the feedback, or we can let Justin go and we'll be able to collect it and share it with you and Steve, and stick with the process of the agenda, if that's okay, Donna.
Okay, so just, I'm having a bit of hard time hearing you, Emily, but I think what we're saying is Justin has advised that the feedback that we gave at the last meeting has not yet been incorporated into some of their thoughts or into part of what's moving forward. But this is our opportunity to, after we've had 4 weeks to think about it, is there anything more we want to add to that feedback? And could I get some clarity? Is Steve there, Emily?
He's on his way back. So my advice, Donna, is that we let Justin go and that we move on to the green fund application. And when Steve comes back up here, because he's just stepped out for a moment, we can continue with this as the next item after green fund applications review. And we'll get all the notes to Justin and Steve from what we discussed today.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Okay, Emily, could you take us through? I think we have 2 green fund applications, correct?
We do.
All right, let's proceed with those.
All right, so joining us today at the Environmental Sustainability Committee is Patricia Stokes, treasurer from the Algoma Rod and Gun Club. They submitted a green fund application which falls under the energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions reduction pillar. Very similar to the application that we saw last month from the Conservation Authority. The Algoma Rod and Gun Club had an energy assessment completed by the Provincial Small Business Lighting Assessment Team of their facility, which is a nonprofit, I will add, making them eligible for funding under the funding parameters. And they conducted an assessment of their buildings, so the main clubhouse, the 200-meter range, as well as the garage lighting. And they're looking at replacing their existing lighting with more energy efficient LED fixtures. As I said already, the provincial assessment team has already assessed the building. The fund for this program, as a reminder to everyone, small businesses, organizations, nonprofits, what have you, are eligible for a free $2,000 LED lighting upgrade, which includes materials and labor. However, sometimes the costs exceed for the property what is available through the funding. And this was the case for the Algoma Rod and Gun Club by about $1,300. So they are, as a nonprofit, they do not have the means to cover the additional costs of the remainder of the work needed, and have applied to the Green Fund for financial assistance for this energy efficiency retrofit. This project has an opportunity to reduce their energy consumption by approximately 62%, or 19,000 kilowatt hours. And it will also reduce it'll result in annual energy savings of approximately $1,500. So the return on investment is less than 1 year. And for those who are interested, based on the energy savings, this project will reduce their emissions by approximately 0.32 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So they're here today asking the committee for money to complete the entire retrofit of their whole facilities for LED lighting. That's my summary of the project. Pat, anything else to add? Not unless anyone else has questions. So Donna, over to you.
Anyone with questions regarding this application? Okay, seeing none. I believe we have a motion here. So looking for someone to move and second the request for funding from the Green Initiatives Fund from the Algoma Rod and Gun Club. But if someone to move into second, Mark, thank you to move. Someone to second, please. Andre, thank you very much. All right, on that matter, any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. We're good to go, Pat. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Okay, so our next project for review for the Green Initiatives Fund is from the city. I have Brent Lamming here, Director of Community Services, who will be presenting an overview of the project. Brent, would you like me to share the PowerPoint or do you want to share your screen?
No, Emily, if you could share your screen and bring up the presentation, that'd be great.
Okay, give me 1 minute here. Okay, can everyone see my screen? See the PowerPoint? Is anything blocking it?
Looks good online, Emily.
It's sort of a problem. I think you can just try that. Yeah, okay. All right, okay, so as I said, there's an application for the Green Fund from the city, specifically pertaining to a deep energy retrofit audit, and Brent Lamming will be presenting the project overview. Brent, over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks everyone for having me today. Just want to give a quick background, maybe some things that the city has just done recently in conjunction with this asset management planning tool with respect to an audit that could be completed through the Deep Energy Retrofit Audit Project Program. Recently, over the last number of years, we've completed a number of LED retrofits at the GFL Memorial Gardens, the John Rhodes Arena, also the Northern Community Center soccer pitches, which have been completed and been quite successful. We've also recently put out a tender for a full heat recovery unit project at the John Rhodes, which takes the waste heat energy to be retrofitted to heat pool water. That's something of a first here in Sault Ste. Marie from a city perspective. We've also at Transit at 111 Huron Street, we've enabled the roof to the last roof replacement to be able to enable solar panels to be installed to generate our own source of energy there that we're looking forward to do in the upcoming years. And we also have approval from City Council at the last budget cycle of our first electric bus, and hopefully many more to come over the next number of years. And with our chair with bike racks, just as a side. So we're looking forward to proceeding on a number of those fronts. So I'm here today to ask for support. There's 6 main facilities that this would cover. This facility, I am over top of 3 of them. I was the chosen one to present today. So they would encompass the John Rhodes Community Center, the East End Water Treatment Plant, the Gardens, the Public Works Center, Fire Hall number 4, and the Transit Garage, which I'd mentioned earlier on. So the grant is designed to help municipalities integrate energy and GHG reductions into longer-term plans for managing community buildings. So it's really a prudent asset management strategy to provide a report to us to know where to focus our efforts on. And these 6 items through Emily's efforts and her inventory have identified the largest areas where we have emissions right now. And through this audit, it will allow us to essentially target ways we can continue to improve the efficiency of the buildings. Next slide, please, Emily.
I think you're supposed to.
Sorry, there you go, Brent.
Yeah, no problem. So as we stated, the Deep Energy Retrofit program are aligned with the city's efforts to achieve our zero emissions by 2050, and the feasibility studies will help in that effort with reducing carbon and energy use performance. So it says here on the slide that under the scenarios, 50% reduction within 10 years, 80 within 20, and net zero by 2050. Our goal is to get net zero target, and it's on our roadmap to double down and reduce the change long term. So it's a key step as we move forward in this process and to tackle energy using existing buildings, which will represent 43% of our total carbon emissions from our total portfolio. Next slide, please, Emily. So the cost breakdown here is it covers 80% of the project total. So we'll be asking for $200,000 through this grant program, but the total project cost is $250,000, leaving a $50,000 gap. And that's why we're coming towards this fund today to help cover that, to lead us down this path to help get to net zero. The key point that can be stressed here is estimated that approximately between 40 and 60% per square foot is industry average for an audit. However, this can vary based upon the project scope. As such, staff estimated project costs 55% per square foot and factored in a 13% contingency. Some of the information that's key below here, you'll see on the carbon emissions that were on the prior slide, approximate square footage of each building that is there, and the cost breakdown on the right. Next slide, please. So it aligns with the GHG reduction strategy and energy efficiency, with which are the pillars of the CDF Green Initiatives Fund. A deep retrofit is defined as a multi-measure energy efficiency retrofit that achieves at least 40% in energy savings. It has the opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and asset maintenance costs. At a city level, investing in deep energy retrofits now reduce the need for future expenditure on new energy generation as the city grows. And as stated here, that the greenhouse gases and nearly half of our urban emissions come from building-related energy use. Without accelerated retrofit activity, climate scientists are highly confident that extreme weather events will lead to catastrophic impacts on city residents, structures, and institutions. Deep retrofits scaled up now can lead to the needed carbon reductions in building sector to help lower frequency and severity of extreme weather events to affect cities. What I can say from personal experience on the last retrofits that we've done in some of our community centers, as stated earlier on the gardens, John Roads, and that it's really helped with our cost efficiency and our emissions. And I hope that the committee is supportive of this application to plot a roadmap, and we'd be happy to report back in future on how the future successes and plans for asset management moving forward. Next slide. So at this point, happy to try to answer any questions. I'm more familiar with the community services buildings, and I think Emily's here to help with the wastewater treatment plant and some of the other items that were listed there. Thanks for the opportunity to present today.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you, Brent. Any questions for Brent about this application? It's fairly comprehensive and significant.
I'd like to add something if I may, Donna.
Sure.
So just to add, thank you, Brent, by the way, for your presentation. One thing that I'm not sure that was included or was said earlier is that this fund is only eligible for municipalities to apply to once. So you have, as a municipality, the opportunity to apply to this fund that will help establish these deep energy retrofit audits and to look at a portfolio of buildings. And so this is really a great opportunity, and it aligns with a lot that we've been talking about at this committee on establishing that roadmap, which is something that Brent brought up a couple of times already in his presentation, on how we as an institution can get towards those net zero emissions. So that's why we're going after our biggest energy hogs, our biggest emitters, to go after this funding. We did have some audits that were done at city facilities in 2010. Some of the technologies and costs even in those audits are extremely outdated. So it's very important that we stay up to date. Technologies change. And one of the benefits of a deep energy retrofit, or as I like to call it, the Cadillac of retrofit audits, is that it looks into the future and takes into consideration those risks. It doesn't just look at the energy, it talks to the staff, the facility managers who are managing those buildings, and comes up with a very concrete strategy and different scenarios per the funding requirements to help us get to those carbon emission reduction targets. So just wanted to add that in there as some additional context.
One thing, if I may, Madam Chair, just to add on to what Emily stated, actually stated the study that happened back in 2010. That's what we based a lot of our asset management planning on for the community centers. And so that's why some of the full heat recovery was an identified item, the LED light, some easy low hanging fruit that we're able to tackle. So we use that as a guide to plan our changes along with best practices for asset management planning with respect to things that are age and lifespans and life cycles. So thank you, Emily, for pointing that out.
Thanks, Brent. And again, one last point, sorry. These audits, they look at the building as a system, the interconnectedness between different pieces of equipment. It goes beyond the low-hanging fruit. So the energy, LED lighting, it looks at some of the deeper system changes, as well as opportunities for incorporating renewables, because this type of audit has as a scope, not just energy savings, but emissions reduction as well.
Thanks, Em. So for clarity, this request is being asked for to support applying for the total grant in the amount of $250,000, right? And this is our 20%, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And could you speak to, please, because I think it's important in this time of the year, like what is left in the fund and what would be left in the fund if this was approved?
Okay, so at present, we have approximately $52,000 remaining in the fund, bearing in mind that we have approved the Algoma Rod and Gun Club project and the possible approval of this project as well. If this project were approved, we would have approximately $788 left in the green fund for the remaining of the year. Another thing I'd just like to add to as well, for some context purposes, is, as you know, the green fund budget is $50,000 a year. But this year we were in a unique situation because we had a bit of a top up from the city's previous existing green committee. So we were in a unique opportunity to not only fund multiple projects, which some of you may recall we did a summary on at our last meeting, but also help with some city projects as well. So we've been able to benefit both internally at the city and externally within the nonprofit community in Sault Ste. Marie.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Questions from anyone with regards to this application? Seeing,
I'll go. Just from my experience, what are we going to do to prevent this from sitting on a shelf once it's done?
Good question, Mark. So I'm just going to refer to the application for a moment. So what we've outlined in the work plan for this project is that it's going to incorporate discussions, risk management workshops, and planning into like the forecasting of the costs, not only of the measures, but the cost savings, evaluating the net present value of the project, so we can have a very concrete roadmap of what and how we have to get there. In addition, this type of study is a prerequisite to apply for capital project funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. You need a study that is up to date, current, with modern recommendations for technological change that can enable you to take advantage of those capital project funding dollars. So it really is necessary if we want to access even further funding and hopefully down the road establish some more of a budget internally at the city to help pay for these projects as well. So it's sort of like step one in these more energy intense reduction projects.
And Mark, if I may add there on that, as you know, because we work closely together on some of these projects recently over the last few years, is that we obviously look at the payback from a financial perspective and the GHG reduction. So, and then we target those ones first, and we try to get things that are 5 years or less in the paybacks.
Yeah, I just, from my standpoint, you look at this study will identify some of these things like the heat recovery that we talked about. That is a longer payback. It's not we're not going to see it happen overnight, because in terms of say lighting, some of this stuff is 5-10-year payback on some of these projects. And I think that's kind of, is there a strategy, or is there anything to say, okay, we should be approving these projects, even though they are longer, so that we understand that the buildings aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
And that's always my concern, is that, yeah, if somebody sees a 10-year payback and says, no, we don't want to do that.
100%. So this type of an audit is going to require a change in some of the traditional ways that we look at project implementation. It's not only going to look at that payback, but it's also going to look at, as Brent was mentioning, the Ghg emissions reduction.
Right.
It is going to require that change. So like I said, one of the benefits of this is, you don't just have someone coming in and looking at your utility bills. We'll be working with the facility managers, really understanding how the buildings work, and creating a bit of a systems approach to the implementation strategy. But it will require some change management. But right now, we don't have anything beyond those older audits that shows the emissions. So it's bridging that gap between just looking at the cost savings and also the emissions reduction as well. And that's one of the big benefits of this kind of a project.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with questions here? Andre or Fred or Eric or Pedro? No? All right. So, looking for someone to move and to second approval of this project.
I can do it. That's-
All right. So, looks like we had Mark and then Pedro, I believe. All right. Any further questions or conversation? All right, seeing none, all in favor of approval of this funding to support the retrofit audit. All in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on now, I see Steve is there. Moving on now to the, thank you, Brent, to the active transportation master plan. And we've had some time to think about things. So looking for further comments. Steve, did you want to say anything before we ask the group if they had anything in addition to add to the comments we made last time?
I have a couple of things, if I may, just a summary.
Sure.
But you can go ahead as well.
Well, I don't really have any comments really. I just, wanted to get the feedback from the materials that we submitted to the committee last month. So if everyone's had a chance to sort of kind of digest it a little bit and kind of have any comments or concerns or questions on those particular items, we can discuss that and maybe get into a little conversation about next steps in the ET master plan as well.
Sure. Does anyone have anything, off the hop that they want to bring forward relevant to what we heard in the last meeting that we did have?
Oh, I know what you can do.
Hi, Donna. I sent an email to Emily about just summarizing some of the points that I was trying to make that I didn't see reflected in the minutes. So I just sent that to Emily and she can share, or if you wish, I can summarize it. Is that, Emily, do you think we have time for that, or just share the email with Steve or the group?
We do have time, Andre. You can go ahead and share that, and then I will be summarizing each comment.
Okay. I'm not, one point is, I think I made this about like the 3 E's, I guess it goes along that, but the 4th E or another one of those is to look at best practice with regards to modal shifting and some of the strategies that I use in other countries to that actually result in a modal shift in what we're about. That was my first comment. And I have a lot of resources if you're interested, but I'm sure that the consultant has access to that. I would like those things to be mentioned and covered, because I think it's not just about infrastructure, that's for sure. Second is the cycling club has been doing inventories of, and our members are very familiar with the cycling infrastructure and where there's a need for connectivity. And we have done inventories, and we would certainly like to share that with the consultant. The third is this is I didn't see anywhere where maybe this is premature, where the intersection of Second Line and Great Northern Road was going to be looked at in this process, and that intersection is a real nightmare for a lot of us who go through it on a regular basis. We have no choice. There's no real reasonable alternative, and there's, I believe, ways to fix it. And the other one that I think is timely, and I mentioned, is make sure that Queen Street downtown is considered to ensure that bicycles are provided with a safe and accessible infrastructure.
Andre, what you mean by the infrastructure is like security infrastructure, right?
Well, I mean, there's no bike lanes downtown.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's right.
All right. Anyone else have anything to add to the comments to take down to go forward with compared to last week or last time? Sorry, it wasn't last week. Nothing new? Eric, I feel like perhaps you weren't with us at the last meeting, that you couldn't be there. Am I wrong about that? I just want to make sure that your comments are included. Was there anything that you thought was missing?
I think I was at the last meeting. I think it
Oh,
was
maybe I'm the one before. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So
I
no,
attended the last one virtually though.
okay.
But I was there.
One day, someday, we're all going to be in the same room.
Okay, so Donna, if I can just jump in and just maybe on a high level, remind people about the different documents that were shared with us. So we were shared, of course, the two summary reports that Steve and Justin shared via a presentation. And we talked a little bit about, you know, looking for the objectives to incorporate more sustainability, as well as looking at the city's GHG reduction plan as part of the policy review. We talked about, you know, maybe looking into subsidies and incentives, cyclists into the design of Queen Street, incorporating language regarding the climate emergency and how active transportation relates to our net zero goals, improving connectivity and encouraging the continuation of AT networks, specifically for youth, as well as, you know, other people with accessibility issues such as seniors, and ensuring that after the engagement phase, we can leverage these insights to design and conduct a decision-making analysis. So we were provided with an additional couple of documents, a stakeholder list that the committee was invited to review and see if there was anybody else that might be missing. Did anybody have any stakeholders that they felt were perhaps overlooked and should be added? Okay, that's great. And then there was also another document that was shared with us, which was the draft survey, which I believe is still being developed, right, Steve? If this is not the final version, we're still working on finessing it.
We're trying to develop the methodology that we disseminated. So we're going to be exploring a possible online engagement platform called Public Input. We've been given permission to kind of test run it with the Active Transportation Master Plan. And in that, it'll be essentially this one-stop shop for all things related to the Active Transportation Master Plan. So it'll be information about the project itself, but it'll also have the survey. One of the tools that we're hoping to develop is actually, and this might sort of parlay well to what you were saying, Andre, is a map where people can kind of go on to the platform and actually drop pins, provide comments on certain geographic locations in the community where they want to provide comment on AT infrastructure. So if someone is concerned about a particular intersection, they can drop a pin on the map, they can provide comments. Other people will be able to sort of validate it or kind of like, or, you know, kind of the social media approach about adding on to those comments as well. So we're really hoping to get a really comprehensive and sort of meaningful discussion through these online platforms. We're in the process of developing that site now. We hope to have a draft of it by next week that we can review, and hopefully we don't want to post it fairly close to the election, because we don't want to kind of create that, I don't want to say discussion piece or potential controversy in and around the election, but shortly after the election, we'll kind of roll that engagement platform out. And we hope to do a combination of both virtual and possibly in-person engagement as well. So hopefully having those sort of more traditional open houses where we can invite the public to kind of gather around maps, provide comments, but also, looking at certain areas and almost doing a bit of what we call like a charrette process, where people can kind of be looking at a particular area, we can have a conversation about it, and maybe in real time provide some sort of options or solutions to those areas. So we're trying to be as dynamic as possible with the engagement. We're trying to utilize as many tools as possible to get as many people to engage on that process. And we also recognize that there are groups of people in the community that are typically difficult to reach. So hopefully with these additional measures, we're able to really get all aspects and all voices of the community heard. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Sounds very comprehensive.
Yeah, and sorry, just to kind of touch base, concurrent to the engagement piece, we are starting to look at what we're calling like these special areas. So areas that are particularly challenging from an AT perspective. And I hear you, Andre. I recognize that spot is particularly challenging. So, but there are a lot of these challenging areas in the community. So we kind of have to rank which ones are feasible to tackle. And that might be one of them, but we are looking at a number of other special areas. Like for example, Black Road, that is particularly close to home issue at the moment. We're hoping to take a deeper dive as to what options may be available for Black Road. And there are some other ones that we have to look at as well. So we do have to balance from a budget perspective, like what areas or what particular locations or priorities versus kind of like how much time and budget we have to kind of look at these areas as well. So, but definitely, we're not sort of avoiding looking at certain areas, but I guess at the end of the day, it might be, there might be varying levels of discussion or intervention depending on sort of the overall need or the overall challenge of the area.
Great. So did anybody have any feedback on the survey in particular that was part of the package? Any questions that you think should maybe be added?
I did, something came up actually while I was reading through the survey, just trying to answer it as if I was actually answering it. And that was the questions around what are the main barriers for both walking and or cycling. Because I walk a lot and I also do cycle a little bit, but I do enjoy walking places a lot. And I was just sort of thinking, why do I not do it as much here in the Soo as I did when I lived in other cities? And I think one of the main reasons that I don't walk to stores and stuff as much is not really the distance to places. I think it comes down to lack of efficiency of public transit again, because I was kind of reflecting on the fact that I would walk to stores and then maybe jump on the bus to go back, or even ride to a store and then put my bike on the bus to come back home. And I feel like I don't do it as much because I feel that often I don't know if it's justified or not. I think it is justified to a degree. I feel that the public transit system isn't as efficient or well integrated into active transport as I would come to expect, I guess. So I just thought that wasn't really captured in the survey as a possible barrier. But it also just kind of got me thinking about whether we should also be thinking about the integration and efficiency of public transit in general in relation to active transportation.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I would say that active transportation and public transit are kind of two sides of the same coin. I think they have to work well together. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And not to get too much into that particular discussion and kind of hearing what Andre was saying about modal shift, one of the things that we hope to tackle with this active transportation master plan is the idea of the culture around active transportation. So how do we get the average person, like Andre is going to ride no matter what, you know, doesn't matter the road or the weather conditions, but how do we get, you know, sort of that larger age 80 population choosing active transportation? And one of the things that we need to start thinking about is that integration between biking, walking, rolling, and public transit, and not seeing them as two separate means of transportation. So I hear you, and it's something that we're going to have to tackle. I don't have the solution at present, but hopefully as we go through this exercise, you know, it is recognized that those two mechanisms are better integrated. And sort of just speak on an existential level, how all of those 18 public transit, all of those methods are recognized as a form of transportation within sort of the larger travel network, right? Like, so thinking of roads beyond just as this, you know, mechanism for cars, but how do we sort of move people, whatever choice of transportation they decide to take. So yeah, that idea of integration is something I think, you know, Donna and Andre on staff have been talking for many, many years. And, you know, we're starting to recognize it, but now it's sort of like, okay, how do we influence the design of these spaces so all these different means of getting around are really captured in the final design or the built form?
Pedro, does that answer your question, Eric? Pedro, go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing that this made me think as well is that I'd like to see, and I'm sure others would like to also consider how much funding on the budget is allocated for cars, vehicles, road construction, and how much what's the differential to active transportation, and how can we reduce the gap? And what's the plan for reducing the gap? I'm not saying, I mean, I know we are very far away from switching completely and considering active transportation measures and ways of traveling first and vehicles second. We're far from that. But how do we get there? I mean, that is something I don't think we have well defined. Can someone? I'd like to hear what the plans are, or if we have, what would be the next steps? How could we get there?
So my quick answer is anything to do with budgets, although staff provides recommendations, it's ultimately up to City Council how funding gets allocated. So that is sort of the big elephant in the room, is a lot of that is determined by the priorities set by council. Having said that, I know internally what we're trying to work with is that we've established a bit of a working group internally to look at projects more comprehensively. So, and a lot of it are the capital works projects. So what we're hoping to do, there's a lot of synergies of utilizing capital works projects to achieve a whole other range of community development goals, right? Whether it's active transportation, parks. So we're working with, you know, engineering, community services, and sort of looking at projects to find ways to maybe apply a larger lens to these projects. So what ends up happening in the past is, engineering will have their budgets and they roll with their projects. And then we're kind of coming in after the fact and saying, well, what about the bike lanes, or what about landscaping, or what about, other maybe aspects of the projects that would make it a better community project. So we're trying to kind of come out in front of that and really try to scope these projects before they're actually designed, before they're presented to council, and say, okay, how do we evolve these projects to serve much bigger goals than just, fixing the sewer pipes or fixing the quality of the asphalt. So we are starting to work on that. I acknowledge it was still far, and from an appearance perspective, it does look like a lot of capital resources are going into fixing roads and accommodating vehicles, but we are starting to at least catalyze that conversation where we're trying to expand sort of the scope of these projects to serve more than just vehicular transportation. So
Thank you.
we still have ways to go, but at least internally we're starting to have those broader conversations.
Great, thank you.
From my perspective, Pedro and Steve, the answer to that question is what gets prioritized gets funded. That's been my experience for many years, and even more so in the last few, just really understanding and I think as people that live in this community, like all of you who are doing as part of serving on this community, is really being very clear and showing support from the community on what those priorities should be, because I don't disagree. We need to change the conversation. It's right. We need to think differently and change that conversation so that priorities are determined in a different way, and therefore funding flows to those things differently than it has in the past. And one teeny tiny small example of that is how now we no longer have a roads budget in Sault Ste. Marie. We have a budget, and it's called a transportation budget. And we can do better on this too, but we have a transportation budget now, and that is inclusive of all forms of transportation. It's not, we don't have something that's like where we just think roads as that fall under transportation. We got a long way to go, but it's important that we, I think it's important that we change the conversation exactly like you were talking about, Pedro. It's really important.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody have anything else they want to add here? We need a few minutes for Emily's update, but one question I had that I wanted to ask, which is these next discussion papers, because I'm really interested in reading more like the one or two, I forget now, that we already, yes, because we have 1 and 2, and then there's 3 to 7. What's the ETA on these discussion papers so that we can be thinking about things like then the comprehensive network, regulations, the tourism and cultural shift recommendation? I'd love to get my head into that. When are we going to see those things, Steve?
We hope to have we hope to roll them out like monthly, or like between like a month and a half. We obviously don't want to go too far ahead without rolling out one of these discussion papers. So I would anticipate at least a month to probably no more than a month and a half to the next paper. And one of the reasons why we want to be timely with these is because we want these discussion papers to really be the basis of our engagement too. So while we have all this kind of information that people can digest, they can also be providing input into online surveys or public open houses and things like that. So we're trying to educate and inform people so that their input into the process is a little bit more meaningful as well. So yeah, we definitely don't want to have a big time lag between the rollout of these papers.
So it's been a month since our last meeting, so we should be expecting paper number 3 to be coming out anytime now, right?
Hopefully this next one is a little bit more challenging because we're kind of getting into some of these, like I said, these these special areas or these challenging areas. So we are doing a little bit more, I guess, analysis around some of these. But hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we do have something rolled out to the public. And again, we're also trying to roll out the engagement process as well. So there's a bit of kind of administrative back end work that we're doing to kind of get that up and running as well.
Okay, if there's nothing further from anyone on the update on the active transportation plan and our ideas, seeing nothing. Emily, can you take us home with your update, please?
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Okay.
I'll be sharing the summary of what we heard today, passing that along to you and Justin.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here, Donna. Okay. All right, so a very brief staff update for me. I had just created a slide for anyone who wanted to kind of have an agenda, if you will, and what we talked about with Steve and his team. Maybe I'll just say that sounds like there's going to be a lot of opportunities for consultation within the greater community. So consider you have like a prelude to it here, but there will be many more to come from my understanding, which is great. So a couple of highlights. I know at the previous meeting, I mentioned that work was underway for our community retrofit financing program project. This is a three-tiered project. So we've started doing a landscape assessment with our consultant. We started to get some really juicy insights on energy consumption, opportunities within our community, how many homes have actually undertaken the Natural Resources Canada energy audit program, and starting to establish some archetypes for different types of measures that we can see. So this is a project that the committee supported, and I'm happy to keep you updated as we move forward. We'll actually be holding a risk workshop with city staff as well as key external stakeholders to evaluate some of the different financing models next week. So very excited to see that, and community consultations will be rolling out soon as well. So please keep your eyes open, and a friendly request to the committee to spread the word when the press release goes out. This is an opportunity for residents in our community to have their say about a program that could really reduce our residential carbon emissions. So stay tuned for that. We have, in line with the application that came to the committee today, we have submitted a pre-application in the hopes that this would be approved, which it was, to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for the GHG Reduction Pathway Feasibility Study. Next, we'll have to go to council to get their final stamp of approval, and we'll be doing that in November when they start meeting again. A final project that I just wanted to update the committee on. You may recall earlier this year, I spoke to you about a collaborative partnership the city is working on with Algoma University called City Studio. So we are working with them on a watershed remediation project. We will engage students over 3 semesters to identify, design, and ultimately implement a remediation project here in Sault Ste. Marie. We're hoping this will set an example of watershed remediation to improve quality, biodiversity, etc. So we are in phase 1 of this project right now. We've identified 2 sites in partnership with the Conservation Authority, and we're doing an inventory of the species and also a needs assessment on what could go there to improve the watershed in that area. Next semester, so in January, we're going to do a deeper dive and establish more of a project design. So apply to funding on how we can implement this, look into different measures in more detail. And then if everything goes as planned, we'll be implementing the project. So actually doing the infrastructural changes, etc., in the summer of next year. We have we have a placement student from Sioux College who's working with us on this, and about 80 ecology students from Algoma University as well. So really looking forward to seeing the insights from that one. Every semester, Algoma U and the city host something called a hubbub, where they share different projects that are underway with the City Studio. So I'll be sure to invite the committee to that so you can learn more about it in December of this year. With that concludes my update. A couple of neat resources as always. Please keep them coming. Thank you to the committee members who share. And we will hopefully have Tunaris speaking as our spotlight next month. Our meeting will be on November 10th. As always, it's available to attend in person or via Zoom. That's it for me, Donna.
Thank you, Emily. Anything further from anyone? Seeing nothing, could I have a motion, a mover and a second to adjourn this meeting? Andre and Pedro, thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks for your participation today.
Thank you, Donna.